Today we're continuing our look at the book of Exodus, looking at the Old Testament, and we're picking up with the actual Exodus now. Where we left off was after the 10th plague, and Pharaoh says to go. He says he wants them to go, and he wants them to go quickly after what has happened. So, looking at picking up at Exodus 14, we're looking, and I have a map here basically showing the direction, one of the proposed directions that Israel took during the Exodus. There's about maybe three different ones that people would go with, two that maybe are equally plausible. We don't know. So I always hesitate when presenting maps because there's no map in the Bible uh, of of this journey. We get a description. Did you have a question?
No, I was just.
Oh.
It looked like the news for the last week.
Well, um, yeah, so we see them starting. Let's see if the highlight here will work. Uh, there we are. We see them starting up here and traveling south is what will continue to monitor their progress. Um, but this isn't as important. I know a lot of times we place a lot of importance on the archaeology, and I'm not saying there's no importance there. Please understand me. But if someone's disputing, was this location this here or was this location in this other place, does not matter. It doesn't matter. And so we have to be careful. Now, it's very interesting. There are things we can learn when we know of locations. There's things we can perceive, we can see, and the like. But the most important information we're ever going to get is contained where? Right in your Bible. Yes, yes.
Yeah, people say that, oh, if we could find this, we could find that, it would help convince people that God's real and everything. Here again, man is trying to help God because God gave us the information he wants us to have. That other stuff is incidental. If God wanted it known, he would have made it known. So I agree with you on the path. It's not as important. It's interesting, but not important.
Yeah. What does the rich man say when he's in torment? Let me go back and warn my brothers. And what's the response?
Wouldn't do any good.
The prophets. Let them hear the prophets. So, with all of our feeling like we need to help, God doesn't need any help. As we believe, others can believe. It may take great difficulty. For some of us, it was a journey to get here. It took a lot of study and there was a lot of doubt along the way. But we can believe based upon God's word. So, as long as we understand that when we look to those archaeological things, we look to maps, we're really looking at the more abstract. It's very interesting the journey that they had to take and seeing some of the obstacles and visualizing what this meant. This wasn't a walk across the street. He didn't say, let my people go, and then they just walk across the street and they're free. There was quite a journey to be taken with quite a few obstacles that they had to overcome. Some they didn't deal with too well. Brother Tharp.
You're talking about estimates of over 1 million people wandering through the desert. That's not a small undertaking.
Yes, and those estimates vary. Some will say 1 million is far too little.
Yeah.
So, again, that's just based upon some statistics, maybe birth rates. I did calculations. There's a birth rate calculator and how a population might grow. Of course, that's based on our society today. But it's interesting playing around with that and starting with those that entered, looking at the number of years, and just seeing how many people we could be talking about. It's quite astounding. Yes.
I heard a lot of preachers saying that for Israelites to go from Egypt to the Promised Land, even if they crawl on their knees, it will only take about a few weeks to get there. Instead, God made Israel wait 40 years to get into the Promised Land.
Sin.
Yeah, I mean, as you
mean-
like to do, you're jumping ahead in the story, but yeah, they're delayed a little bit. It's okay, it's all right. This is what we're going to talk about. Now, I won't go to a movie with you that you've seen, but but in this case, this is good. Again, the presumption is we know the general story anyway, and so there's no spoilers here, and if there were, we want you to know that story. But yes, we're going to quickly walk through some of those reasons. When I mentioned that they had challenges along the way, the challenges start right away. We see God leading Israel by a pillar of cloud and pillar of fire, so Israel isn't left to wander in their own way, doing whatever it is they're going. He doesn't just say go and leave them to their own devices. He's actually guiding them, and Pharaoh pursues Israel to the Red Sea. Just an amazing occurrence after everything that's gone on, and him deciding, you guys need to leave here. You need to get out of here. That's a pretty reasonable conclusion given what he had witnessed. Now, what we're seeing here seems very unhinged. It really does. Given what he's seen, given what they went through, pursuing them doesn't seem like the conclusions of somebody who is all there. Brother Tharp.
Yeah, based on his reaction throughout the 10 plagues, it doesn't surprise me at all that he's either motivated by revenge or by the greed from the plunder that they stole, or both, that he's pursued them. It's not surprising. You're right, it's not a rational mind, though.
Yes. When God talks about him hardening his heart, this is coming into play when you see all of this. It's not a normal heart. This is not the normal attitude somebody should have. I'm not talking about a spiritual mindset. I'm just talking about just your natural mindset. This is not that. This is truly somebody whose heart has become very, very cold. And this is something that we need to pay attention to. There's a lesson here that sometimes I don't think we stop and consider. We have to be careful that our hearts don't grow bitter, don't grow cold, because we can get to the point where even God can't reach us. That's not to say God can't save us. It means that we've closed him out to such a degree that we're just not going to be willing to hear anything. We're not going to be willing to receive anything. That's a dangerous place to be. I do not believe this is here just to tell us a story about some mad king. This is a story about what could happen to us. Which side are we going to be on? Are we going to be on the side of following God, or are we going to be on the side of fighting him? That is a warning for us today. Yes.
We talk a lot about other sin, but the Bible specifically says that there are 6 things God hates. And you know that Micah 6:8 says that do justice, love mercy. The last thing is walk humbly. I'm sure Pharaoh being the head of the great country, pride runs before him. And that's his fall. Pride is one thing that people in power should realize, that they have great responsibility to bring that into harness, so to say, in control. Otherwise, it will lead to a lot of suffering.
Brother Young, what you're talking about there is really applying the wisdom of God. He's given us these examples. We can know the story and never apply it. Never. That wisdom is not just being able to quote a scripture, but understand it. If you're going to lead in any capacity, you should be willing to do the work. You should be humble. This is an example time and time again. When we desire leaders, we should look for people who are humble. Sometimes congregations want very, very flashy preachers. Why? Hoping they'll draw, right? But with that lack of humility, what happens to the congregation? You know, we really need to think about the example that God gives, even for parents in dealing with their children. You know, it's okay to be humble before your children. It's okay to be wrong before your children. It really is. Did you have a comment?
I think it's gone.
Okay, I apologize. But anyway, that is in essence wisdom. That is taking the examples we see from God and applying that wisely. Again, whether it's in our own households leadership to the leadership of nations, we need to be careful in looking for people that exemplify positive examples from God's word. Now, of course, I'm not standing here advocating that, you know, now our government system is equal to the Bible or anything like that. We know we can pick whoever we want to pick in our society, and it's a group of people choosing. I'm just talking about us. What do we desire? We should desire godliness all the time. That would be wisdom, the application of these examples we see. So Pharaoh pursues them, and they get to the Red Sea. They're backed in. They're trapped. They can't go anywhere. And what does Israel do? They just immediately pray to God and realize, look, God has gotten them out of Egypt. God is going to see them through this. There's no problem. There's no reason to worry. That's what happened, right? No, quite the opposite, right? But that's what should have happened.
Right.
Right? Can we conclude that? That's what should have happened. Remember, I was mentioning those plagues and that cycle wasn't just for Egypt. It was for Israel as well. They should have learned something. And soon as they're tested, they break. Brother Tharp.
You answered it again.
Okay.
You asked a question and answer it. So.
Yes.
We do the same thing, though. The minute something is difficult or hard and we have a problem, we forget how many times God has gotten us through things we've gone through.
Mm-hmm.
And if we would remember that, if we would just remember that each time, knowing that, you know what? I know I'm going to get through this because God's gotten me through this, and this. But we're human and
Yeah, but it is something we need to do. We need to not live in the past. I've said that before. We can't live in the past. But We have to learn, which means we must reflect. So reflecting is not the same as living in the past. It is remembering, it's thinking about the things that God has gotten us through. When we close out a year, a lot of times we talk about the things that happened during that year. One of the things we might want to do is think about our difficulties. We don't like to think about our difficulties, but maybe we should think about our challenges and what we've gotten through. And maybe we should rehearse that. That's almost like God with Israel saying, hey, remember the Passover? Remember God delivering you? Remember this? Every single year? Remember Jesus Christ on the first day of the week? You should remember him obviously all the time, but I'm referencing the Lord's Supper. So these are healthy things to remember so that we don't fall in the same trap. Brother Tharp.
If it's not ongoing and we've gotten through a problem, usually that turns into a blessing anyways. So remembering these things, there's exceptions, the death of a loved one, things like that. But if it's just some difficulty and you already resolved it, we know as Christians that that's what makes us better.
Indeed. But many times we forget about, if we remember to pray and we were anguished, we forget about it as soon as we're over it. And if we're not humble, we might even boast about, look what I did. I was able to accomplish this, that, and the other. So we've got to be careful. So he sees they're now trapped perceived trapped by the Red Sea and between the Red Sea and Pharaoh's army. And of course, the people start to complain. They said, look, we would have been better to stay in Egypt. But remember, God heard their wailing. God heard their cries. They were treated very, very harshly. And they desired salvation. It wasn't just thrust upon them. They were crying for it. And as soon as they're tested, they are talking about, well, we would have been better off there. Of course, God, for the first time during their journey, demonstrates to them his power. They're being guided by a pillar. It should be a constant reminder, hey, God is with me. But God demonstrates, he parts the Red Sea, they go over as on dry land. That should be quite a sight. Now, really, really think about seeing that. Not the Universal Studios version of it, but the real parting of the Red Sea and walking across on dry land. And you're not just walking on dry land, there's a visual there. Don't you think that visual would stay with somebody? And people, you went to the Grand Canyon. I've never been to the Grand Canyon. People describe the Grand Canyon as something that's very awe-inspiring when you're there. They say it's not the same as watching it through a YouTube video or something. I'll have to take your word for that. But people say that things like that have, they've seen them, they've seen pictures, but experiencing the magnitude, the grandeur of things can often have an impact, and a lasting impact. Wouldn't this have a lasting impact on Israel?
You would think.
Yes.
Yeah, you would think so. And it may have for a lot of them for their 40 years till they were all gone. But you mentioned the pillar of smoke and the pillar of fire. And doesn't the presence of God with you, I think that's an even bigger thing, and it just becomes everyday to them. Now I know if we applied it, if we had this pillar of fire or pillar of smoke that only we could see, showing we have the presence of God all the time. Sometimes we just lack the memory to recognize it. But to me, visual presentation of God's presence is pretty awe-inspiring too.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, these are good exercises, discussions to have, to realize, as Sister Buttrey points out, we're really no better. So don't get too comfortable with yourself. We need constant reminders, and we need one another to encourage us to stay along the right path. Because we'll do exactly what they did, Brother Young.
Well, when come to miracles in the desert, especially this parting of the Red Sea, this lady come to mind. I don't know whether you remember or not why this lady come to mind, because she was put in the Hall of Fame of Faith, because even though she has not seen it, she said, I've heard about it. And she risked her life and hit the spies. You know, if she went against her own government, risking her life to do that because she heard about
Yes.
what happened in the desert.
And that is something that is so key. When they get to the promised land, they keep encountering people. Oh, I heard about this. I heard it. 40 years later, I heard about what their God did. Even when Israel lacked in belief, other people remembered. Their enemies remembered and feared God because of it. So, yes, indeed. So God parts the Red Sea, and they go over, and of course Pharaoh's army is decimated in this, and that is the conclusion of the matter for Pharaoh, since he pursued with his army, with his chariots. They were all destroyed. We see the
In a way, Thomas is better than the Israelites, right? Because Jesus said that you have seen me, you believe because you have seen me. So, more blessing will come to those who have not seen me and yet believe.
Indeed.
You bring lots of meaning to that statement.
Indeed, indeed. We see the song of Moses and Miriam as they praise God for their ability to overcome that obstacle, their victory. The bitter waters at Mara are tested. That's a whole class in and of itself. But they complain, and we see that God makes the water drinkable for them. And God sends manna down from heaven to provide for them. So what are we seeing? Well, and if we were following this map, we're, let's see, right around here for the at that point. So they're moving south according to this particular map. I go with this one mainly because the majorities that I can find that go back seem to follow this path. There are a few that cut a little earlier. But with the bitter waters and the manna from heaven, they're being reminded that God is providing everything. They are not sustaining themselves. That is an important thing that we also will see consistently throughout the Old Testament. They are not providing for themselves. Now, this is not to say that they don't work, but they cannot claim to even exist by their own power. And we see it time and time again, where they don't beat armies by overwhelming forces, but because God is with them. And when they should beat armies, they can't when God is not with them. and they can't feed themselves. They can't provide water for themselves. They can't provide basic sustenance for themselves without God providing for them. So why are they here? Why are they being driven into an area that is a bit less than hospitable to them when they're supposed to be going into the promised land? So the idea was for them to go right into the promised land, of course. But we see a bit of a training ground for them. God knows what's going to happen, and God prepares them. So even in their sin that we haven't seen yet, we know God's plan is unfolding. Brother Tharp.
Well, that's what I was gonna ask, is this an example of God knowing what's gonna happen and therefore puts them in a different place than letting them get to the promised land and then sin? So he's like preemptively keeping them out because of their upcoming sin?
So I don't know that that would be the words that are appropriate to use. I'm not saying they're not either. I'm just saying I don't know. I do know that they sinned. We also know God knew they would sin. We also know that all of this is happening by God's providence. The only portion of what you said that I hesitate to say is God is keeping them out. That one's hard for me. Hopefully you can understand.
Or they're keeping themselves
They're
out.
keeping themselves out, yes. But God's plan is coming to fruition. And had they not sinned, then God's plan would have still come to fruition. God would have known that. It would have been according to his plan. So either way, his plan is going to be done. But we see, we know, God knows this is going to happen. And so everything that happens seems to be a bit of training for them and seems to be educational for us. Sister Buttrey.
They needed to learn that they needed to depend on God, and God would provide everything. As what we need to do is depend on God.
Yes. And so I don't believe these lessons were for Israel alone. I don't believe Israel was for Israel's sake alone. It is for us to all learn lessons. All of this happened, not just for them, but for our learning as well. Do we need to wander in the wilderness in order to be told not to sin? Do we have to have manna come down from heaven in order to understand that God is there? He's able, and he's able to provide for us. Yes?
I mean, for Israel to come up with the golden calf, that itself is amazing. And amazing in that sense that is totally ridiculous.
It is.
And yet, we have to guard our hearts because we build golden calves all day long in our lives, and yet at the end of the day we look back and say, why did I do that? So we have to guard our hearts actually, and because of, we can blame it on daily living, the pressure we have, the people we have to work with. We just have to be real careful.
Yeah, what we have to do is learn the lessons that God is teaching us, not just the scriptures, but the actual lessons that he has for us. Just continuing on, I'm going to go a little more quickly. We see the water from the rock, another example again. Even from a rock, God can provide sustenance for them. Amalek attacks Israel, and God provides victory. They can't be overthrown, they can't be beaten as long as God is with them. That's a very simple lesson for us. We cannot be defeated as long as God is with us. God is not walking away from us, so the only question is, are we walking away from God? And then Moses' counsel to appoint they use the word judges there, sometimes elders, but their judges describes the role that they were taking. Every little matter was being brought to Moses. He couldn't handle that. It was too much for him to handle. There were other things he needed to attend to, so he appoints 70 men to help with judging in the smaller matters, and the larger matters were still brought to Moses, who brought them before God. Brother Tharp.
There's a lesson we see too many leaders not paying attention to. Too many leaders try to do everything themselves instead of getting help.
Yes.
I mean, we've seen it over and over again.
So I need you all to go.
And I'm talking about leaders in the church, not country or anything like that.
I need you all to go and find 70 men. Come on.
Well, when your congregation's 1 million, we'll do that.
Let's start with 7.
What was that? Let's
start with 7.
Yeah. Michael.
I've always wanted to know manna. Was it cookie dough or cheese puffs? What was manna?
It was bread from heaven.
Bread from heaven. Okay.
That's and by bread it means meat. It means food, rather, food from heaven, and that's really the extent we really know. Now, many have analyzed.
I wonder if it tasted good.
And
Tasted like good donuts.
Donuts?
but you know, like anything, people get sick of it, and we'll see. Israel does become bothered by it. Now, when they get to Sinai, which is down here toward the bottom, let's see if we can do that. Yeah, right here toward the bottom, the law is given. And so Israel arrives at Sinai, and God gives the 10 Commandments to Israel. We know that the 10 Commandments is not the entirety of the law, but this is a very important element now that we see where God is defining a moral law for them. He's not talking about all of the civil functions. We're going to see that as well. But when it talks about him giving the 10 Commandments, he's talking about their moral structure. Again, I've mentioned before, one of the interesting things about the 10 Commandments is it has nothing to do with what someone else will do to you, or what someone else agrees to, or what someone else can force you to do. These are all things that you can absolutely do. And that's what we need to understand. The principles that we learn from the 10 Commandments as we apply them to our lives talk about us having a proper moral standing with God, how we live, what our attitude is, how we face God, how we love God, how we treat our fellow man. It's all about us, not in a selfish way. It's about us being right with God. So that's the lesson that we get from the 10 Commandments, even today. The people fear, stand afar off as Moses draws near to God, and the laws concerning servants are given. Laws concerning violence and personal injury are given. So like I said, we see in addition to the 10 Commandments, that moral law, God is telling them exactly how they are to live. Now, we don't live according to these things today in our society. That doesn't mean that there's not good principles for us to get out of here. We know God is a just God. And if we learn the lessons that he's trying to teach us, there would be great patterns to follow. However, the danger is man goes all the way to one extreme or another. Let's disregard all of this, or we're under the law. It's one or the other. How about we learn what goodness and justice and humanity are all about? Wouldn't that be a great teaching to take away? Yes.
Yeah, it's funny, when they want to bring the 10 Commandments back, they're being legalistic, literally being legalistic. They want to enforce these, and they completely miss the whole purpose, what Jesus talks about. The law was given to teach you, to help you not to use it as a weapon against other people. And it is a shame that we can't find, that some people can't find the right middle ground.
Yeah. Yeah, we'll want to bring some of the 10 Commandments back, not all 10. And we won't want to bring the civil laws back in. I'm not sure why we'll want to bring this part, but not these other parts in. So it doesn't make any sense. Now, again, we need to know this information is useful to us, but it is useful to us in gaining principles that God is teaching. Always think to the principles that God is teaching. What is God teaching here? When you look to the Old Testament, what was God teaching? Not just what happened. We need to know what happened. We need to know what it said, but we need to extract from that what's the lesson that God was teaching each and every step of the way. Brother Tharp.
I mean, not all this is done out of malice or anything like that. I think that there's a tempter out there, and he's misleading a lot of people through ignorance, telling them this is what you need to do. It's an attack on God. This whole thing of trying to bring the 10 Commandments back or rebuild the temple, all of that. These are just ways of attacking God's people.
Distraction, misdirection, misinformation. It's almost as if the tempter is a liar and using God's word to misdirect man. So yes, absolutely right. I don't believe everybody has malicious intent, but it doesn't excuse anyone. We're still responsible, we're still accountable. So less laws concerning violence and personal injury, laws concerning property, restitution, and responsibility, laws concerning moral, civil, and religious duties. So pretty much laws governing every aspect of their lives. Laws concerning justice, mercy, Sabbaths, and annual feasts are given. God promises that his angel will lead Israel into the land. Now, this is absolutely essential to understand that Israel has seen God do amazing things. They've witnessed this. And now God is saying, look, you're going to be led into the land. There is no reason to fear. We know the story. We know what they do. But God has told them what's coming. Now, there's a principle there. God has told us what's coming. There is a promised land. We will be victorious over the enemy. Yes.
Yeah, this is a principle that applies to us a lot. You know, some of the other ones, you know, it's harder to see it, but this one, it's easy to see, and that's that people tend to fear the unknown in the future.
Yes.
And that fear can derail your life.
And not only the unknown, but the known. Later, when they see something, they fear it. And what do we see all around us? Death. And we fear it. And God has said, look, don't even fear death. But we see it, and we fear it. Or there's the aspect of the unknown, as you pointed out, and we fear.
And when I said unknown, I mean we see, like you said, you see something, and the unknown is what's going to happen.
Yeah.
You
No,
know,
I understood you.
We see the giants.
I agree. It's both, but I want to point out it's both of those.
Yeah.
There's an aspect of what we don't know that scares us, and then what we know, what we see. We know we're going to die, and there's going to be a resurrection, and we still fear. We see the death part, but the resurrection we haven't seen. We see people die all the time, but we don't see the resurrection. So both of those things, we're scared of everything. But God's already told us there's a victory. He told them, you're going to be victorious. There's absolutely nothing that they should fear. The covenant is confirmed with blood at Sinai, and Moses ascends the mountain to receive God's commandments. And we're going to go into next week some of the further instruction, specifically looking at the tabernacle instructions. We're not going to get into it in depth. That's a whole class in and of itself. But there's a broader lesson to gain from looking at it all. But this is all still part of receiving the law. I put it in a separate section just to encapsulate the fact that in this portion, he's specifically talking about the tabernacle and worship. Brother Tharp.
You skipped by a point I'd like you to take a little bit of a look at next time, and that's, you said that the 10 Commandments are confirmed with blood. And next time, maybe explain that.
Sure.
Does that include the people who turned to the idol and were killed? Is that part of it or not? So look at that next week.
We'll take a look at it. It was a major point. I'm just running behind.
Okay.
But we'll take a little bit of time to look at that. If I forget, remind me.
Okay.
If you forget, well.
I will.
Brother, yeah.
Will you also dwell into the reason why this 10 Commandment has to be fulfilled and then removed? What are the reasons or deficiencies that the 10 Commandments carries, and as such there has to be, then it was, Paul said, call it the law of sin and death. So obviously when you call it the law of sin and death, we need to be liberated from it. The Israelites need to be liberated from it. Why is that so?
Okay.
Almost like we had a class on that.
Yeah, I'm going to, I'll do a Sunday evening class, just a one-off class specifically on that. Because otherwise we'd stop for a whole class, but I think I can handle that in one class. Unfortunately, I'm not able to make a note, but that's going to do us for today. We'll pick it up right around there again next week. Thank you for your attention and your